Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session for archaeology for the math tracks. We'll be here with 4 students today, and we'll be discussing all the tracks archaeology offers. So those will be the tracks of global archaeology, applied archaeology, archaeological sciences, heritage and museum studies, and also the RMA. Unfortunately, we're 1 student short. COVID is still here, so one of the global archaeology student was sick. But I'm an archaeology student as well, so any questions that come up about global archaeology, feel free to ask them still. We'll answer questions at the end. My name is Vera van Heel, and we'll introduce everyone first, and then we go in depth, just share our experiences, talk a bit about what studying has been like, what going to Leiden has been like, why we chose the track we chose, because, as you know now, there's 5 options. Just make around, and feel free to ask your questions. So we'll talk about 40 minutes, and then by the end, we're here to answer all your questions. Those can be general questions, those can be specific questions to the person doing a specific track. And note that this is a student experience session, so if you want to know about the ins and outs and the specifics about the track, there's another video you can watch. You can go to the platform, to the information market. There will be the instruction video about the MA track, and it's also in the email you got earlier. So I think it's time to start. Let's introduce ourselves first. Maxime, would you like to start?
Hi, I'm Maxime Mullers. You might remember me from the last video from last year. I study the Museum Studies and Heritage track. I focus on the Mediterranean region as well and try to combine the two. And before this, I did my bachelor's in archaeology here in Leiden as well.
Thanks. And Mariana.
Hi everyone, my name is Oriana Chiappa and I'm doing a research master and specializing in osteoarchaeology. I did my bachelor in Mexico because I'm from Mexico, and yeah, that's it.
Next is Diana.
Hello, my name is Diana Winfield Smith. I'm from Denmark, and I'm doing applied archaeology. Focus area is more like public outreach and cultural heritage. And I studied at Copenhagen University for 4 years ago. I've been working for a museum before finally applying here in Leiden.
Thanks. Yeah, now we have a brief introduction of who everyone is. We'll go into more depth in what you've been talking about before, because I heard a couple of interesting things coming up already. I'll introduce myself shortly as well. So I'm Vera van Heel. I'm a global archaeology student as well. I will be hosting this session, so I will be asking the questions. And then, we have all different representatives here. So Oriana is an RMA student, but she will also be here to answer the questions for the Archaeological Sciences. So I think let's dive straight into it, because you've heard all about there's different tracks now, but it would also be good to hear from you why you chose the track you've chosen. So Diana, what made you choose the track you chose?
Well, I was actually looking at several tracks. I wanted to do something with field work. As I said, I've been doing 4 years of field work in Denmark, so I was very intrigued with that one, and also the public outreach. And what made me choose applied over global was the field work, but also the perspective methods, because there was an internship as part of the applied archaeology, so I could use my skills I have gained in Denmark. And also I thought that applied could give me more insights to be a better field archaeologist in general.
So what I gather is that you were in doubt between global archaeology and applied archaeology then?
Yes, from Leiden. I was also looking into landscape archaeology at Groningen University. Groningen. I am murdering Dutch language, sorry for that. But yeah, in the end I chose applied because it was more focused at the skills a field archaeologists need, how to assess the finds, how to understand the methods, and how to reach out for the public and preserve the heritage. That's why I chose applied in the end and did not go for global archaeology or landscape.
Okay, that's interesting. Thanks, because the applied, as you said, in that case, is that it's more geared towards a career in commercial archaeology, probably practical archaeology, knowing more about the all the ins and outs and sort of the technical aspects of what it's like on the ground.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, because sort of to make that difference maybe a bit more clear then with global archaeology, at least from my own experience, I see that it's more about longer trajectories. So you learn about urbanization or climate change, or you focus on a specific area and try to see how that sort of fits into a bigger whole. So I hope that sort of makes clear a bit the difference between applied and global in this sense. But then there's more tracks. So Oriana, could you tell us a bit about the archaeological sciences first? Because you do osteology, but archaeological sciences is more than that, right?
Sure. Actually, there's a lot of ways you can go in archaeological sciences, and there's like the archaeology, which I was in the beginning a bit interested in, but then I finally stayed with osteoarchaeology, and I think there's also paleobotany, and you can of course combine this. I think they are doing this more and more often, combining it with digital archaeology. So it's very interesting because you have like all of these methods and all of these techniques that you can apply to different archaeological material. It could be like human, non-human, or even plants, and yeah, it's really cool. So yeah.
So that makes digital archaeology also part of the sciences, or would that be a separate thing to study?
I think like the digital part is going more and more. It's growing. So like right now it's combining with all of the tracks. So you could combine every track with digital as well. And I think like that's kind of cool.
Thanks. That's great to hear. So we heard about human bones, animal bones, botany, digital archaeology. Is there a focus on materials as well? A specific as a part of the sciences?
In the archaeological sciences, depending on what you want to specialize on, you can focus on a specific material. Like, for example, I'm doing osteoarchaeology and I specialize in human teeth. So I do more of a dental anthropology kind of thing. But definitely, if you are more interested in other stuff, you can always start to just look into that.
Great, thanks. So now we've heard about, the science part of it. Material culture as well, I think, is an important aspect of that, but maybe also looking into how we incorporate that into museums or the present, or how we will deal with that in the future. Is that something that Heritage and Museum Studies focuses on, Maxine?
How it incorporates archaeology into the future? It certainly does. For example, you look at, because every archaeological dig often leaves the site, what happens with the site gets decided later on, but many of the sites are already there and that are deemed important of called a heritage site, and how to manage them for who they are and how to ensure that they stay there even in a more global world is something that would, for example, get discussed within Heritage and Museum Studies.
Thanks. So are there any other examples you can think of now? Like, do you see an overarching theme within your specialization?
I think the overarching theme is largely compared to modern day topics, for example, topics that have righteously so gained more importance, such as artifacts in museums that weren't obtained necessarily always very honestly, or diversity and inclusion in representation, for example, just in media when it comes to archaeology or other things. There's things that get discussed. So there's definitely a very big social aspect to the museum studies and heritage track. And then there's, of course, always the future aspect, but as with any other archaeologist, they could tell you that it's not just looking back at the past and keep looking at the past, it's also always looking at the present and what can do for us in the future as well.
Thanks, that's great to hear. And I assume the ethical, as you mentioned already, the ethical and the policy part, and sort of incorporating everything that's happened in the past, how do we deal with that now? Yeah, I can only assume that's a very important part of archaeology, which might be often overlooked. or treated separately. So I think it's very interesting that here in Leiden you have it at the Faculty of Archaeology, as compared to maybe doing it as a separate thing, just heritage and museum studies. Because I do think having it interwoven with archaeology is probably a large benefit to museums as well and to their collections. Because I know that in Leiden we have quite a few museums for ethnology, but also for antiquities. Is that something you cooperate with in your master's? Is it something you can go to do your internship, do your thesis about?
You can. I was planning to do so earlier on, but then COVID happened, museums closed down, so the kind just fell through. So I decided to go another route rather than once again risk going with a museum in case it closed down. But if you, for example, look at museums, then go to the contact page or to see if they have openings, they often will state that if you want to do an internship there, and especially if it's related to your thesis, they might have a spot. Of course, like larger museums such as the Museum of Antiquities in Leiden or the Ethnologies Museum are a bit more difficult to get into because they are highly sought after, but there's definitely room for doing an internship at a museum and incorporating your thesis into that as well.
Thanks. I got a bit overexcited and already started talking about internships and everything, but I think before we get into that more, it might also be good for Oriana, for you to explain what the research master's is, because of course we have these 4 masters and masters of science tracks, but you can also choose for a 2 years master's instead, the research master. Could you tell us a bit about that and why you chose it?
Yeah, of course. So research master, the main difference between a regular master is that it's 2 years. So, and it's a little bit more focused into an academic, like future. If you want to do your career in academics and you want to continue being a researcher, then like that is what it's meant for. So like your thesis is more focused on like, I don't know, a bit more theoretical than the regular master. And we also have different courses that are mandatory. Like, I don't know, we have epistemology and advanced themes in archaeology, like some other stuff that the other courses do not have. But it's also very open and very flexible, so you can decide to do basically whatever you want. And that's kind of why I chose it, because it does have like this academic background and all of this good theoretical basis, but it also gives you the opportunity to explore a little bit more. And like, since you have 2 years instead of just 1, you can do a lot of more other things and actually do I don't know, I think a bit more of a research thesis than just a regular master thesis, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thanks. It might be good to also sort of go maybe a bit more into what makes it then geared towards an academic career or an aspiring PhD maybe, because I think that's what I gathered from what you said, what a research master is aiming at. Do you have any examples of things that you do that a regular master student may not have to do?
Well, I don't know per se, because I'm not a regular master, but like comparing myself to other people that I have met, for example, these courses that I have to take, or we also have to do conferences, like we have to attend conferences, and those are part of your ECTs. Which is actually, I really like it. It's very interesting. Some of the conferences are like I wouldn't know how else to find them if it was not because of this track. And basically we have a little bit more time to finish our thesis. I think that's an advantage.
Yeah. So it's a bit more freedom in your curriculum, a bit more geared towards.
Yeah, it also it also gave me a chance to do not only 1 internship but 2 internships, and like take a lot of electives that I really wanted to take, and just do my program like I wanted, like a bit tailor-made kind of.
Right, that's great to hear, and I'm glad you bring up internships again, because that is, I think, an important aspect of archaeology, and an aspect that probably a lot of people at home are wondering about as well, because Well, we're not going to go into the specific courses you can take and the specific structure of each track, but we will discuss internship possibilities now. I think that would be, yeah, good to know, to see what current students are doing, what you could be doing when you choose to study archaeology at Leiden. So Oriana, let's continue. You were talking about your elective internship. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, well, okay, so the research master, like you have modular courses and you can take those, but they do not have like specific courses for archaeological sciences, and that's why I wanted to specialize in osteoarchaeology. So I took an internship that's like an osteoarchaeology specialization course, and it's like basically just like intensive on how to estimate sex and age of individuals and like basic stuff that you really have to know if you want to be osteoarchaeologist. And this was very helpful to collect data for my thesis afterwards. Because I mean, if you don't know anything, then you feel like a little bit lost while you're trying to do it all on your own. And yeah, but I was always interested about isotope archaeology and this stuff. So I noticed that I could do another internship in that. So yeah, since I had time, I am doing that right now, and it's pretty cool. But I also done electives. What did I do? I did like the R, like I learned R and Python, like stuff that I know that is going to be useful. Maybe you suffer a bit during it, but you know it's going to be useful. So yeah, like
yeah, that might be good to for the viewers at home that might not be familiar with R or GIS or isotope analysis. Well, some things are maybe better for you to explain, but R is an online program you use, and there's also a programming code. So these are things you can learn during your studies as well, which, yeah, as you said, are useful to maybe apply to your thesis as well. But of course, that depends on whatever it is you're doing. I'm doing global archaeology, for example. So for me, it might be not as useful to be using R and having all this data gathered somewhere. But that really depends on whatever you're doing. And then,
at least if you pursue like an academic career afterwards, you will definitely need it. So
yeah, thanks. That's great. Yeah. So if you get it now, the electives maybe sort of count as internships as well in that sense. And I think then we have Diana, because I think for applied archaeology, especially an internship as not as a course, but really going to a company or going to an institution to do an internship as part of your degree, right?
Pretty much. I mean, it is advised to do the internship in cooperation with your thesis, or at least as a step to your thesis. And applied archaeology is fairly new, and it still embraces a lot of aspects within archaeology. So there's a lot of opportunities within the internships. For myself, I did an internship with Archo, which is a Dutch company, archaeological company, where I conducted some field work together with them. And I simply did this because, again, I had 4 years fieldwork experience from Denmark, and I've been involved in all aspects of the archaeological practices in Denmark. So by doing some of the archaeological work here in the Netherlands, I could compare the two archaeological practices and kind of take a first step towards my thesis. Because my thesis is about preserving cultural heritage in urban landscapes, modern urban landscapes. So understanding what is behind commercial archaeology, which is conducted here in the Netherlands, and how government archaeology is working back home in Denmark, also gives an idea about how are we actually preserving heritage. And I know for sure that there's other of my comrades on the track who have done some heritage internship where they were at what's called depots and actually counting and kind of sorting out objects. So there's many options within applied archaeology depending on what track or what direction you want to go with your thesis. But it is definitely a big it's a good option to actually do the internship in combination with your thesis.
Thanks. It's also great to hear that you're at the same time sort of learning about, well, especially for you coming from Denmark and seeing the differences with archaeology being done here, especially commercial archaeology, but then also gathering data for your thesis. I am interested, though, like, do you see any differences? Is that is the applied archaeology and the differences that, you know, and how archaeology conducts is also a reason why you chose to come here?
You think about the archaeological practices or the track itself?
Well, yeah, maybe the archaeological practices as well.
Yeah.
Like,
Because a part of my internship with Arco was exactly to detect some of the differences and some of the aspects that could be improved, vice versa. And one thing I did notice is that here in the Netherlands, when you have commercial archaeology, it's an individual company, and then a company have to kind of defend their economics and their reasons a lot more than government archaeology, where we're literally saying, well, the law's behind us, so what do you want to do? While here in the Netherlands, we have company and we kind of have the law, but we still have to argue and defend the reason, the motives we have. And that kind of led to me to understand that especially technologies such as Arco have developed a small app called Ananas, and it's for the phone, and it can immediately take pictures of post holes, and you can put in the data about these features into the digital database. That's a thing we are still doing manually in Denmark because we have to ask the government to pay for this kind of technology, while Arco can pay for it by themselves because, well, they have to defend their motive and reasons. So that's definitely one of the big differences I saw. On the other hand, I can also see that because Denmark is governed, there's a different structure. So Leiden, for example, still have projects going on in Maastricht that will never happen in Denmark. We have different borders or perimeters where each museum is conducting their archaeological practices. So that would say one of the biggest is like 1 hour drive from the museum.
thanks. Well, it's great to hear that this allows you also to get more of that understanding of sort of mechanics behind how archaeology operates in a country, really, and to get more of a behind the scenes kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's great to see that the differences now already between sort of being more on the forefront and doing the new research, gathering the new data, and then also seeing how that translates into the field. But even though, you know, this is something I think is important to mention as well, not doing an RMA does not exclude you from pursuing a career in academia. Obviously, you do not have to have an RMA to apply for PhD positions, for example. So even though, you know, like within the tracks, there might seem a division within that, it does not mean that you're excluded, or if you do an RMA that you cannot go into the field, for example. But I think from your examples, it already becomes clear how, yeah, even though everything, you know, archaeology is such a broad field, and that you really have your own sort of niche and way to find within that. And what is it like for museum and heritage studies then? Because, you know, we've just talked about having a behind the scene view on, well, commercial archaeology, I guess. With museums, there's also a lot of stuff that we as a visitor don't know about, but that's very important to know.
Yeah, well, I've never really done a internship within a museum myself. Like I said, there's many opportunities, for example, in a depot, and maybe with a curator as well, you can run an internship. But outside of museums, there's also a lot of options. You have heritage organizations who look after certain interests. You have the government who dictates policies where you can run an internship. But there's also a bit more archaeology focused still within heritage, because it's not completely separate. You can still find your internships at a public archaeology kind of field. So think of public outreach, or how do I get certain groups to participate in archaeology, so it's not just a certain group that does everything that's interested. So there's all these kinds of things that you get to deal with within the museum studies and heritage track if you choose to do an internship, which for this specific track is also still an elective. So if you don't want to, you don't have to.
Thanks. I mean, it's great that you also draw attention to the public archaeology side of it as well, because yeah, it's more than just the objects you see in a museum, or it's more than curating an exhibition. Do you see those often a lot of on-site things as well? Do you feel heritage plays an important role with, for example, ongoing excavations, or say it's in a city archaeology? Do you think heritage plays a role there? Is that something you learn about as well?
You do in different ways, of course. There's the small things, and I think there's probably some overlap with the applied archaeology track there, or focus there, because of course you're going to have, in some instances, you're going to have this, for example, just a sign explaining just on the street, or maybe something a bit more hidden, an artwork that's supposed to represent what was found there. Then you also have larger sites and who's interested in them. For example, the local populace, do they actually profit from that? What do they think of the site? And all those kind of things are related to the public archaeology side of that within heritage. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I think that we've got quite a good overview now of sort of the opportunities you get for internships, sort of the differences between the tracks. But I think it would also be good to know, at least I'm interested in this as well, to hear from you why you chose Leiden in the end. We've discussed this a little bit, but I would also like to know what it was like sort of coming here the first time. Of course, you've made your decision, but what was it like actually studying here? And maybe I would like to start with Maxime, because you've done your bachelor's here as well. What made you decide to continue here, and why did you make the switch from more of a world heritage, a world archaeology excavation bachelor's to more of a museum heritage master's?
Well, first of all, I had my room already, which made things a lot more easier because you don't have to go out and look for another place to stay wherever you decide to end up. So that was definitely something I considered in my decision. But beyond that, during my bachelor's already, I took more of a heritage focus because I liked the topics that were discussed, the sometimes more philosophical questions that were asked. And you get a different view of what happens after the research and after the excavation. So you go more into how does this get handled in a museum after it's done excavating, or how does this site get handled afterwards? And those are things that I was interested in. I was also personally very interested in public archaeology. So all these things are incorporated into the Heritage and Museum Studies track. And then I also did my bachelor's in archaeology. So it gives me more of an opportunity to branch out later. So I'll have still my archaeology degree. I can still excavate if I want to, but now I get more of a view on museums and heritage instances and organizations. And I can also branch out to there if I choose to do so.
Thanks. Yeah, so you feel like you get a more all-round perspective of archaeology. Thanks. And Diana, what was it like getting here to Leiden? Because we've heard all about the struggles and the choices you had to face before deciding to choose applied, but then you actually got to Leiden. How was that?
Yeah, well, I chose Leiden for several reasons, actually. As I said, I was looking at landscape archaeology, and Britain was one of the better places to study landscape archaeology. And then, as we all know, Brexit happened, so everything became more expensive if you wanted to study outside the European Union. So it was very clear for me that I didn't really have the money to pay for a scholarship or study in Britain, and I had to choose somewhere else. And in 2019, I participated in an excavation in the Amazonian jungle in Peru. And there was a PhD student from Leiden who also was participating in this excavation. And she talked really nicely about Leiden. So when Britain kind of was not an option anymore, I've decided to look what was offered in the Netherlands, and that's how I stumbled upon Leiden. And since it's number 8 on the world's best universities within archaeology, it was pretty easy. So yeah, that's how I came to Leiden. And the process of finding a place to live and everything went rather smooth. But I think I'm the only one who had a smooth transition down here.
Yeah, that's the thing that sometimes happens with sort of getting to a new place, finding a place to live. This is not what the talk show is going to be about, but I know that there's people you can ask about that as well. So if this is something, if you're an international student coming here, please check out the information market for more information about housing as well. because yeah, as you said, that is also obviously an important aspect of getting to Leiden. And you also mentioned the ranking for archaeology, which I'd like to expand a bit on, because it has been consistently in the top 10 for a couple of years now, mainly for research. And that's what I feel that it's incorporated in your education as well. That's something I personally really like, is that the research people are doing is a course you can take, for example, or they will bring that into the classroom, or you can go on excavation and actually be part of that ongoing research. Something you will experience when you take a couple of courses. They're really geared at fast excavations, for example, which as a global archaeology student I found very interesting, because then you have a specific case study you can apply to a more regional or even a more global scale. But yeah, that's on a personal note. And Oriana, because you got here during COVID times, but now everything is slowly opening up again. Courses are, in person again. Can you tell us a bit about how that has been for you?
Yeah, well, when I decided to study in Leiden, it was like in the middle of pandemic, and I just finished my bachelor literally like March 2020, and I was like, well, what do I do next? And I decided to come here mainly because of the only thing that I really knew is that I wanted to work with human remains. And in Europe, I wanted to go to Europe because it's affordable more than United States or the UK, etc. So yeah, I wanted to come here, and like many of the other courses, either you have to learn another language like German or French, etc., or it's a specific type of region or period that they're interested in. And that's why I chose Leiden, because it gave me like a very flexible opportunity to like kind of discover what I wanted to do, and yeah, without focusing already in some type of archaeological period, or yeah, like medieval archaeology or Roman archaeology or Egyptian, etc., etc.
Thanks. And you feel like your program has been tailored that way as well? Like you could explore your material more than you could the regions?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, COVID hasn't been that easy in terms that there's not that many excavations ongoing in other places like there usually were. Like, I don't know, I've heard that there were some excavations going in Dominican Republic and in other places like that, and right now that hasn't been possible, but definitely I have been able to work with other stuff that has also been interesting. So yeah.
Thanks. Great to hear all these answers. Maybe something I would like to get into a bit more as well is then, being in class again, being at the faculty again, going to the labs, well, meeting all the fellow archaeology students. For example, did you take any courses together? General question, nodding, shaking. None of you have been in the same class together? No?
No, not yet, I think. I mean, when I took most of my courses, it was like middle of pandemic, so I took all of the courses online, and then I was kind of lucky because I had to do lab work and my internship, so I could have like a bit of social interaction then and meet people. And I think that's how I met Maxime, like somewhere in the faculty, and yeah. But other than that, I haven't taken courses with Diana, but or Maxime. Yeah, no.
Yeah, it's also different years overlapping here.
Yeah, exactly. And also tracks, so that's kind of also different. Like, I know a lot of people of archaeological sciences that have never met other people from other courses that I take, and it's because, yeah, the overlapping tracks and stuff.
Oh, that's interesting to hear that, because I do know that, for example, within well, maybe not the MSc, the Archaeological Science track, but the MA track, that there's overlapping courses and electives you can take from one another as well. So if I see an elective I like from Applied, for example, I could take that as well. And that's also a way to, well, mix with the other tracks a bit and sort of see the different perspectives as well, because I can imagine that someone with a more heritage background or more applied background looks at something differently than someone with a science background or someone that has been looking at the global perspective of things. So Diana, have you been taking any electives outside your applied track then?
Yeah, if you haven't asked me, I jumped in. But yeah, I decided already in the first block when I arrived here to do a study in heritage research methods and approaches, I think it was called, because I knew where I wanted to go with my thesis, and a little bit of approaches and methods wouldn't be bad for heritage studies because it's basically what I'm gonna do. But I didn't meet Maxime. He's from last year. I started in 2021. And then I've done the Human Planet, How and Where We Began to Shape the Earth. It's a very long title, but it was an interesting course. And I learned afterwards that it was not part of applied. But again, applied is it's kind of a very liquid description of what it is, because it includes a little bit of heritage, a little bit of global, a little bit of field work, a little bit of science. So there's a little bit of everything in it, and it overlaps with the other tracks.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's good that you emphasize that again, because yeah, we've been sort of putting everyone a bit in sort of their own little square here, but yeah, obviously it's not that monolithic.
No, applied archaeology is pretty much embracing the other tracks as well, so you have a more opportunity to kind of liquefy yourself into a little bit more heritage or a little bit more science, whatever.
Thanks, that's great. And then Maxime, because you know, you have maybe been taking electives outside of archaeology, out of heritage as well. Will you tell us about that? And maybe as well, tell us your favorite course, because that might be good to know as well.
Sure. I think last year I took an elective that wasn't necessarily within the heritage track. That was, I think, either applied or global archaeology. It was how deep history shaped the human world, I believe, with Professor David Fontein. And it was a really interesting course. A lot of discussions were had there. There was, I think, specifically most of it was discussion, in fact, of the literature. Something which I really enjoyed. Something that happens either regardless whether it's online or whether it's on campus, because the goal is still that everyone gets included in discussion. Everyone gets to say their say. But beyond that, the heritage track, it has its mandatory courses, which are very much heritage focused. And then it has a lot of other electives, which are all shared mostly by the other MAs. I don't think there's any archaeological sciences electives that you can take, perhaps digital sciences or something in that regard. But you still manage to meet a lot of people still from other MA tracks. So it's not like, oh yeah, you're a heritage person, you're with your heritage group and you don't meet anyone else. But as far as courses go that I took this year that I really enjoyed, was probably one of them was Underwater Archaeology and Maritime Landscapes, because it was a course where because normally you don't hear a whole lot about maritime archaeology or underwater archaeology, because it's a separate thing. Mostly hear about terrestrial archaeology with a little bit of like underwater archaeology sprinkled in here and there. But this was a specific course focused on it, and it was about, I think, 7 weeks long. And you discuss completely different methodologies. You learn about different tools. Of course, there are some overlap still. For example, if you work on a river, or what maritime even means. As in maritime, you can still find something that's maritime on the terrestrial excavation. Beyond that, there were a lot of fun anecdotes, because of course the professor is an expert in the field, so you're going to get a lot of stories, diving stories or other kind of things. And there's always a field trip as well.
Oh, that's fun.
Not necessarily to an excavation, because then everyone would have to hop on the boat or something, which would be a bit costly. But for example, to a museum of sailing history. This year it was in Texel, I think, which is an island to the north of North Holland. This should be the largest one. but sadly I couldn't go at the time. And beyond that, there was also talks of a diving class, diving instructions being taught there, but sadly 2 students signed up for it, so they kind of fell through as well. But yeah, that was a course that I really enjoyed.
Thanks. So you talking about the diving club reminded me of the botany club as well. This is something maybe fun to know for the people. There's sort of these little clubs around the faculty. Hopefully the diving club will start up again, but there's the botany club and there's the zoology club. There's some discussion groups. So if there's a specific thing you're interested in, you can gather around with a group of students or a group of PhD students, maybe even, that will join, and you can go into the field and explore these things, or discuss it, have a journal club, things like that. Those are also extracurricular things that go on at the faculty, which are fun to join, and also a good way to meet students, maybe from a different discipline, but still interested in the same things you might not have thought about before. But I think it would be good to go to a final point so we have enough time for the questions. One thing I would like to say before I go ask you about what you want to do after your studies and what you want to do with your thesis, maybe a quick overview of what the courses will look like, because we've been talking about this, but I think the general theme, you can say courses are 7 weeks long. You'll have a weekly session, and usually it is sort of an hour of a presentation and an hour of a discussion, or practical work instead. So I think it is not just a one-way thing where you sit and you listen. You actually sort of engage with all your peers and discuss the articles, or that's what it's like for the non-lab-based classes, at least. Oriana, could you quickly say something what the electives are like per week, maybe in short?
Like electives?
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on which, but yeah, you usually have like a lecture of 1 hour maybe, and then you do the work. So yeah, for example, for the programming classes, we had like, I think 2-hour lecture or something, and then a 2-hour during the week that we also had like, we were on campus and working with our program, and then the professor just came and answered questions if you had any, or if you needed help ASAP.
Great. So that was a brief thing about how the courses are generally set up. Then I think something people are wondering about as well when they're making a study choice, I think, what to do after, what can you do with your master's degree? Have you already started thinking about that, or is there ways you want to incorporate that with your thesis? I'm just spitballing here, but maybe Diana, you can answer what it is you're thinking about.
Well, many options, I would say, depending on a lot of things. My decision is as soon as I get my master, I'll be back at Denmark doing the field work I did before. You can't really, you can work as a field archaeologist just a bachelor, but you will need the master in the long term. So that's one of the reasons I also choose to get the master. A thing I get to explore a bit more, as I said, was the cultural heritage and public outreach, which is not options we really have in Denmark or Danish universities. So with my thesis and with the master in applied, I get more specialized within public outreach and better at the excavation methods. So basically, my master have given me insights to before, on, and after the excavation.
Thanks. Maybe to briefly sort of make more specific what you mean that you will need a master's within field archaeology. Is that to get a different position, to grow a bit more within the company?
Well, I think I learned from my internship with Arcol is that the archaeological practice also works differently for the hiring of archaeologists. So if I understood it correct, here in the Netherlands with commercial archaeology, you have kind of a few years where you have to work as an assistant, field assistant, before you can get higher up, and the MA is part of that process. But back home in Denmark, that's not really a process. It's more like at some point there will be less work, and at that point the museums will only hire people with a master because technically they are more educated and know more about the field work, but they will also choose people who have more experience. So I'm kind of in a gray zone where I still would be elected, but it's a big chance to take because we all know at some point archaeological work will decrease and there will be less to do, and then they might choose the master students or the master archaeologist instead of just a bachelor.
Thanks for clarifying that. And Oriana, as an RMA student, are you pursuing an academic career?
No, yes, I do want to do a PhD. I currently am looking for possibilities of doing it. I mean, I really want to do it here in Leiden if it's possible, but then yet again, you have to go into a lot of bureaucracy things and how to get funding and all of this other not so fun things that archaeologists have to do. So yeah, currently I'm doing that, also finishing my thesis. So, oof. And yeah, but I mean, I would also maybe go back to Mexico and do it there. Like I have a lot of possibilities on where to do a PhD, but in the end, I don't want to do a PhD just to get a PhD. I want to do one that I really want to do and maybe get a little bit of money while I do it. So that's why I want to do it in Leiden, if it's possible.
Thanks. And I'm happy to hear that your experiences here, make you more excited about continuing your study. That's great to hear. And Maxime, do you have any idea about what you want to do after your math?
Honestly, I think for me, all the options are still on the table. I wouldn't mind continuing to go into the field for a bit, just to get more experience. I wouldn't mind working at a museum or a heritage institution, but as I said earlier, I'm also very passionate about public archaeology. So I think ideally it would be somewhere where there's public outreach involved with it, where you don't just keep within necessarily within academia itself, but also try to convey the information to the public. But whatever is in my future remains to be seen.
Thanks. Do you have any, maybe, just to make it a bit more concrete, are there any types of jobs that do that? Like, is there anything you're thinking about?
I have talked. Oh, sorry. I have talked before to a archaeological company that is somewhat related to a bit more public outreach. It's currently, at least in the Netherlands, not necessarily the biggest sector or the easiest to find a job in, but you can tell even within the faculty, it's a topic that gets discussed more and more. So there's at least some importance. So I expect there's probably also quite a few organizations in there that will start looking at that.
Thanks. Okay, then I think there's a lot of questions that have come in, so it'd be good to go to those now. We still have some time, and hopefully we can go through all of them. So let's see. Is it possible to do a pre-master's track for the archaeological research masters? That's a good question. Yes, it is possible to do a pre-master's. You can go to the website or send us a message later so we can send you the link maybe. But yes, you can definitely do a pre-master's for archaeology, and for the RMA, you have to apply anyways. So you will do a pre-master's track for the master's and maybe look into it a bit with our admission office to see what the options are for the RMA. Unless, Oriana, you know anything more about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't understand what a pre-master is yet. So don't ask me that, please.
So that would be good to clarify that as well. There are certain admission requirements you have to fulfill to be able to start any of the tracks. And if you miss a few ECTs or do not have background in archaeology, there's this year you can use to fill up that gap. So that's an option some students wish to take if they didn't do archaeology before. So yeah, definitely we have a pre-master's track. The specifics you will need to contact the admissions office. Let's see, let's go to the next question. How many people apply for the Osteology Sciences track?
A lot.
A lot.
And I think they increase every year. At least now, I think at least there were 20. So yeah.
Do you think it's mainly international students coming into the osteology track?
No, definitely not. I think both.
Okay. Let's see. I have completed my master's from archaeology and I want to complete my specialization in osteoarchaeology. Is funerary archaeology or burials taught in this course? And not archaeology.
Sorry?
Funerary archaeology and burial.
No, like we don't have like a course about that specifically, but you can definitely do your thesis about it. And I know several people that are working on it, and yeah, like the professors are very like they are specialized, not specifically in that, but like they do have knowledge and they have the resources to help you and everything, so you can do it definitely.
Thanks. And I think with this, it's also maybe good to note that funerary archaeology can also go beyond osteology. You can look at the grave goods, and then you don't necessarily have to do that in relation to an osteology course, for example. You could also look at material culture or literature, maybe. So I think for funerary archaeology, maybe it's not a course on its own, but there's definitely possibilities to do that as a thesis, do that as an internship, do that from different disciplines as well. If that makes sense. Let's see. I am curious to how an average week looks. Do you also have any experience base for archaeology? I can answer the second question for the experience days. We do have an information market and a campus tour coming up. I'll tell more about that when we close off this session, but that is on the 21st of March. So you can come by the faculty, have a tour, and there will be an information market with all the different tracks there and students and staff there as well to talk to. But for the masters, we do not have any individual days where you can tag along with a student, fortunately, no. But I think for a general study week, it might be good to go to Diana, because I think you're currently taking most classes of all of us, probably.
Me?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you repeat the question?
What does a study week look like, an average study week?
Well, it really depends on the choice of electives and courses you have enrolled to. At the moment, here in Block 3, I have enrolled into 3 courses. So I have Monday, where we have Monday and Friday is perspective archaeology. On Monday, we are discussing what the topic is for the week, and Friday we have prepared a small presentation about the week's assignment. And then I have archaeological theory, which is every Wednesday. So we have about, I think, approximately 20 to 40 pages to read, where we kind of put in some discussion topics in a web page, and then we discuss in class what we kind of discussed in this web page. So there's a lot of engagement towards the discussions. And then the last course I have is on Fridays about history of construction, heritage of something with heritage and construction. Can't remember it completely, but that's a rather easy course. So at the moment, my week are pretty filled up, where I do a lot of weekly assignments and reading and preparing. And then there's also the thesis, which I'm working on at the moment. And I can only advise people to start as early as possible to figure out your thesis, because then you have more time to write on it, because that will be a thing if you only have one year master.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great to note already. Yeah, that within that year you have to take all your courses, finish your thesis as well, and that could mean that maybe sometimes you have a bit more fuller weeks. Like you said, you're taking 3 courses, and all of them are about 2-3 hours long, I assume?
Yeah, approximately 2 to 3 hours. So it's another thing. I can't really recommend taking more than 3 courses for each block. I mean, people have been discussing about taking 4, but don't do that. I mean, 3 is tough enough. Stick to 1 or 2. 2 is the most moderate one that it's comprehensible.
Thanks. Let's see the other questions that have come in. Would you say that the ages of the master students vary a lot, or are more people generally quite young? I'm a bit worried I'll be old compared to everyone else.
I can relate to this question. Well, like, I don't know why Dutch students are so young. I'm sorry, Dutch students, but they are very young. And international students, I don't know, maybe because our bachelor was a bit longer, it tends to be like an age difference. But quite frankly, like in the beginning, I was like, how is everyone so young? But in the end, um, the age is not a problem, and you become friends with everyone easily. At least for me.
Right.
I can agree to that one. I mean, I'm 28 myself. I was worried about it when I started. 4 years of field work can do a lot of gap. But even though we have people in the beginning of the 20s, between 20 to 25, and then there's people like me between 25 to 30, I don't really see a problem with the age at all. People just get together because of our interest in archaeology and the specific track we have chosen.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I guess we can all agree that probably most students will be in their 20s, but there's always older students as well, people that do a second master's or switch careers or anything like that. So yeah, generally people, I guess, will be in their 20s, but not everyone. Definitely not everyone. Let's see, we got a few more minutes for a few more questions. Will the heritage courses focus on specific geographic areas? Or how are heritage courses being studied in the MA program? That's the question. Geographic areas.
As for specific areas, it highly depends because most courses are, of course, focused on whatever the professor that gives them focuses on. I can say that at least some of the courses focus on the Middle East as a region, so you get some heritage courses from there. I'm not sure who all the staff is anymore, but before there was a focus on Europe, which it's almost a given. Mesoamerica, the Middle East, and that was most of it for the heritage courses. Of course, you can branch off a bit with your thesis, but it highly depends, like I said earlier, who's giving the course.
Thanks. So you would say that usually sort of heritage-related issues are applied to a certain case study or certain region per course then?
Yes, it's case studies of either projects that the professors have worked on or that they're highly familiar with.
Thanks. Let's see if that also answers the second question. Yeah, how are they being taught? Well, I guess we covered that. So then we can go to a material culture question. Let's see. I think this will be our final question. So let's see. I would like to know more about working with materials as well. Is it a general part of your studies or courses, or really about internships, etc.? I guess I'll take this one because we have material culture as part of the MSc as well. So you have an elective in that. And probably with courses, I'm not sure what it's like for you, please correct me if I'm wrong, but especially in region courses or elective courses, like the smaller courses you have, people often bring in material to exemplify things or to work on yourself as well. This can be ceramics, this can also be other things. And then the internships definitely are a good way to get hands-on experience. This could be in a museum, this could be at an excavation. I would say, yeah, the biggest chunk of experience you will get from internships or a material culture elective. But yeah, we're talking about the path through materials, so it will definitely always be part of your studies. At least that's how I've experienced it so far, but please fill me in. Or
I think it depends on what kind of materials you're referring to, because at the moment, archaeological theory is a lot about how materials shape the human world. So we are discussing a lot about the impact of material and how people or humans interact with materials and how it developed our culture. And the other course I have history of construction of heritage. Now I remember it. We have done a lot of materials in class because it's a lot about how can we recognize different kinds of material in these constructions. So monastery bricks, I think that's called. In the medieval times, you have very, very massive bricks for building construction. You have some very clear constructions for timber in roof or something like that. So we have been shown a few materials in the classroom according to this class. So I think it depends on how you refer to material involved in the classes.
Thanks for that last answer, because that is it. We've used the full hour to talk about archaeology. Once again, if you want to know more about the specifics of each track, please go to the platform and watch the video there, or look in your email. We've also sent it to you there. And then don't forget, if you want to have a look at the faculty and talk to our staff and students, you can do that on the 21st of March. The link will be shared in the chat for you. Please register, that's compulsory. And we hope to see you next year. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.